We spoke before the conference, and you gave me some thoughts that I'd like to delve a bit deeper in. And one of the things we're talking about is a lot of people in IT come up through the sort of technology ranks. You know, they're technology proficient, and their capabilities then get them elevated to become the IT manager, and that then leads them to become a CIO.
Yes.
You said, though, that critical for the success of those people is a need to evolve from their heritage and roots into a more business literate approach. Can you explain a bit more what you're thinking about there?
Yeah, I think, like even if I reflect on my own career, I started as a computer scientist, very technical programming, and then you get good at that, and then people, like you said, they elevate you up to give you a team, and then sooner or later you find yourself as a manager and a leader. But to translate what you technically know into the business problems that they want to hear, to be able to partner with them is a different language. It's a we language, not an I language. It's solving business problems, not talking about technical solutions first. It's sort of taking one hat off and putting another hat on, really, and having a dialogue.
And there's aspects of that, Julia, which is you must let go of that. You must not want to be the problem solver. You must let somebody else sort of take that.
Yeah.
That must be quite challenging for people who see their worth as technical proficiency.
Yeah, I was having a great conversation here yesterday, and we were talking about how IT refers to the business as the business. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's creating a wall that doesn't need to be there anymore. Right? Yeah. We shouldn't be referring to people as the business. They have names, so why don't we talk to them as real people, not some entity that's the business.
And drawing on your own career, when were the watershed moments for you where you started to realize, actually, I've got to think we, not I, and I've got to not be the solver problem, but I've got to engage team members to sort of help solve things? What were the thought areas that...
I was given a couple of projects. I'm a program director by trade. I was given a couple of projects that their business case was inherently technical, and I was just really struggling to get buy-in from the business, even though the problem was very clear, or the technical problem was very clear. Getting engagement from the business was a real struggle, and it wasn't until I started to reframe the problem in the business language, so the productivity, efficiency, customer experience, even employee experience, that people really started to go, oh, now we see where you're coming from. Yeah. And we were on board, but that was a longer journey for me at the time than it probably could have been. Yeah,
well, it's interesting what I'm hearing you say. It's not blaming people for not understanding you. It's recognition that I have to change how I engage people if I want to get different outcomes.
Yeah, and I think we were talking yesterday about when we grew up in IT, that it was something that happened in the dead of night that specialist people do, and now everyone thinks they can do it. Yeah. So you speak to a lot of business people and they think they know what IT is. So we've got to balance their perceived knowledge and their expertise of what they want with what we know. It's not we're the experts anymore.
Well, as far as the business is concerned, a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, thanks to Dr. Google, everyone knows everything these days.
Now we've spoken also beforehand about CIOs aspiring to have a seat at the table, you know? And is that really where that you can make change happen? If you haven't got that seat at the table, is it still possible for a CIO to be an influencer and help drive change?
I think this is a fascinating conversation, and you sort of go, and everyone says it, CISOs say it, CIOs say it, CDOs say it, HR people, HR executives say it. Everyone wants the seat at the table. We need a bigger table. But I think there's two things that I look for. Even if you have a seat at the table, do you have a voice at that table? So it's easy to say that you've got a seat at the table, but can you actually influence that conversation when you're there? And what conversation do you want to influence? And CIOs can have roles from maintaining IT all the way to being the visionary, transformative CIO. Which of those seats do you want? Do you want to have a visionary conversation? Is that something that your executive actually want to hear? Are they bought into that vision, or are you a seat at the table to make sure the IT works? And they're two very different seats, I think.
And what I'm hearing you say is almost having a finger on the pulse about what the business aspirations are and being measured at that, and tempering your approach against that sort of temperament. You know?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. And if your executive want you to have a seat at the table, but it's in a keeping the business running kind of way, and you want to be a visionary CIO, you have to ask yourself, do you actually want that seat?
Yes.
Or are you better off having a seat somewhere else?
Yeah. We're talking about data-driven businesses. We talk about the Ubers of the world, the Amazons, the Googles. What does really being a data-driven business entail for a more traditional organization?
Yeah. I think this whole data-driven conversation is quite fascinating. It's almost like tech has started ones and zeros, and we've come full circle back to the ones and zeros again. Yeah. and it's been a hell of a journey. But I think I think there's one thing having the data, is something else having the insights. And I think it's very easy for us to collect lots of data, but how do we actually turning that into something that means something for our organisation and our businesses? And I think the Ubers of the world, where they've started there, I can see why they're getting lots of value. But if you're a traditional business or you've got a legacy business to think about, trying to harvest that data and in a meaningful way across lots and lots of systems is a completely different problem set than being a native digital business. And
there's a willingness, the need to experiment. I mean, it's not as if just having that data you get eureka moments. You only get it because people are cogitating on what's there.
Yeah, and being willing to actually do something about it. Like if your data says that half of your customers hate one of your products, but that product makes you the most money, are you actually going to do something about it? It's good to have the insights, but you still got to take the action with it, I think.
That's a very interesting point, because what I'm hearing you say there is there is a need for CIOs to be proactive, and some of that proactivity is confrontational. It's challenging people and willing to stand your ground in some of these discussions.
No, absolutely. I think one of the biggest programs I ran was a digital program for a large telco here, and we looked at a lot of the data, and there was one particular part of a process where we said, we don't need this process anymore. And the business just responded with, but that's X number of people, and that's us. You're talking about us. You can't get rid of us. And we're like, but the data says that we don't need you. And so there is, data's one part of the conversation, but behind data there's customers, there's people, there's process, and we've got to be willing to do something with it. I think that's what data-driven means to me.
Okay, now you used the word there, process, and when we had this discussion beforehand, you were talking to me about CIOs need to take a more process, when they're starting projects and initiatives and transformations, they need to think much more in a process mindset rather than a technology mindset. Could you elaborate a bit more there?
Yeah, I think probably my biggest reflection of a career in tech is that it's a solution. It's a solution to what used to be, in many cases, a manual process. And I think sometimes we get too caught up in the technology that we forget the process and the people that run it. And I think a lot of the problems are actually in the people and the process, not the technology. And our job in digitizing business is not to recreate processes as they are. It's to actually streamline those processes. Right? We don't want to just create the same process in a digital way. We want an inherently better process. And we can only do that if we've got the capability in our business to have that conversation with the business.
Yeah. Okay, which gets back to your original point, talking the language of the building, the processes, the language that they're familiar with.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the way a lot of digital and agile teams are going, it's a multifaceted team. Right? We've got product owners, business analysts, technical experts all working together, and they're all working together because they need to understand the business and the technology together. Okay.
So all your experiences, Julia, you came together and you wrote a book about all this thing, and one of the things you mention in this book is that every organization in some ways wants IT to be help with the transformation, the rejuvenation of their organizations, making them relevant. But you said only 17% actually getting any traction with their initiatives. Why do you think so many organizations are ineffective in their change initiatives?
I think there's a few things. So I think we all come from a place of these are our ideas and they're the only ideas in the business. But if you actually look across the business, there's ideas coming from IT, HR, procurement, you name it. Every vertical in the business has has ideas. What happens at the highest level? What makes your ideas better? Like what in the 40 hours of a week, why should I spend those hours working on your idea over mine? So I think there's an inherent mobilizing, and some of the conversation that was here yesterday around saying no is a good thing. How do you actually get to the ideas that matter in your business? I think that's one part behind the 17%. I think another part is we just inherently underestimate how hard some of the change is. So a lot of the technology actually at the moment is quite simple. You know, we're taking things off the shelf and implementing it. But giving it to 5 people versus 500 versus 5,000, 50,000, they're very different problems. And it's the people and the process bit to go what we were talking about. How do you get those people to buy in to using a new system versus the old one?
Well, I get the feeling what you're also talking is, as you're on a transformation journey, people tend to be very ambitious about what they want to do. But sometimes doing it in smaller sized pieces gives people the confidence where they're getting some evidence that actually this is working, and it cements their buy-in to the process. You know?
Running a 2 or 3 year program and coming out at the end and going ta-da, right? We're not in that world anymore, right? It just doesn't exist. They want to see drops of software. They want to see things that they can touch and feel. They want to see the needle moving in terms of customer uplift or employee experience. They want to see that, and it's creating that momentum. And I think the more we can do early, the better.
Why then do you think agile, which has all those implications, iterative, evolution, stand-ups, engagement, why do you think people are getting this negativity that seems to be arising towards sort of agile?
I think there's been many versions of agile. Like there was Lean, Six Sigma, and there was quality, TQM, and there was even waterfall when it first came out was a revelation to some organisations. And I think there's a certain bit of we're looking for a silver bullet, right? And then it's like, oh, here we go. Here's another thing that we can try to deliver. But there's no process. There's no framework that is going to make it work in your business. There's tools that you can use, but it's not the solution, it's the toolbox. You've still got the people are the solution.
Yes.
That's where the progress is,